Hello, this is a quick start guide for completing cultural resource reviews and with a little additional information for those working on EWPs. So, what is a cultural resource review? The purpose is to allow NRCS to allow us to meet our obligations to assess the effect of an undertaking on historic properties, which is required under numerous federal laws. We will briefly cover those. We often hear of Section 106 of the NHPA, which requires federal agencies to take into account the effects of their undertakings on historic properties. We will talk about historic properties the next slide. Here are the various codified versions, and also the NEPA requires us to consider cultural resources. So while these are somewhat splitting hairs, they are different laws which require somewhat different techniques. However, for our purposes, we use them at the same time. So, what is a historic property? Although it implies something like an old building, it can be any prehistoric or historic district, an archaeological site, a building, a structure, or an object which is either included in the National Register of Historic Places or eligible, which is maintained by the Secretary of the Interior, which includes artifacts, records, and remains that are related to and located within such properties. It can include areas or properties of traditional religious and cultural importance to an Indian tribe or native Hawaiian organization, and that meets the National Register criteria. So this is a request for a cultural resource review, or the document is the NCECS-01. That's what we're looking at right here. We're just going to briefly go through the major parts of this document. If you are able to open it in Adobe, most of these have drop-down boxes such as the program type and the county. I'm not going to go through each one, just the major ones that give people trouble. The rest of them are very straightforward. So, the elements of a successful CRR, which we often refer to this form as a CRR, are the APE, location, the notes or the description, which is there on number 12, and the map creation. So, what is the APE, or the area of potential effects? This gives people a lot of trouble because it's vague, and it gives me trouble because it's vague. It's the geographic areas or areas within which an undertaking may directly or indirectly cause alterations in the character or use of historic properties if they exist. It's influenced by the scale and nature of an undertaking and may be different for different kinds of effects caused by the undertaking. The effect means alteration to the characteristics of a historic property, qualifying it for inclusion in or eligibility for the National Register. For archaeological sites, we assume they are present. We assume when we go to a site that has not been disturbed that there is the possibility of archaeological sites, and we do not want to disturb them. So, the area of potential effect, the APE, is indeed a geographic area, and it may change according to the nature of the undertaking. If it is a small undertaking, the APE is likely much smaller than a larger, more significant one. So the APE should be considered to be flexible, and it's something that should use common sense. So, what is the APE Part 2? Not just the area where an undertaking might take place. It's all areas which will experience ground disturbance, including staging areas, entrance, egress, or exit areas, If you consider the likelihood of heavy equipment being used, how is it going to get to the site? All those areas should be included. Will it inadvertently adverse affect another area, such as flooding, sediment deposition, downstream flow? All those things need to be taken into effect. How to represent the APE on our map. So we're going to see um, these particular characteristics a few times, and so hopefully um, people take consider using them when they're creating their map. But please use lightweight outlines. You can see here that this APE is easily seen. Very lightweight yellow lines. Some people like to use red or blue. I discourage that if possible because red can also look like a road. Blue, a lot of times, can look like a stream, especially if you use a heavier weight. There's no fill, so we can see everything that's happening within the APE. Um, there have been times where I see these little cemeteries, the APE might go around it, and it could easily be obscured by a heavyweight line or fill. Please do not use fill. For archaeologists, changes in elevation or relief are extremely important. For example, this map is clearly low lying with little relief, which makes it even more important because these are limited areas where we might find cultural resources. Again, use potential entrance and exit and staging areas. And we're quite aware that some APEs are too small to realistically be represented on a 1 to 24,000 topo. If that's an issue, then just approximate. Use a track number, use your best guess. Again, we know it can change over time. We use these as a starting point. We certainly don't use them as an exact science that this is exactly where everything is going to happen. This gives us an idea in broad strokes until we can actually make a site visit. So we will talk about location, which is numbers 10 and 11 on your CRR. Um, please use the correct USGS quad map. So when we have to do background research at the archives, they are on USGS 1 to 24,000 quad maps. So it makes finding the property and the representation of the environment much easier if, and I don't have to track down the quad map. They are located, the USGS website has a quad map locator. You can zoom in onto any point in the United States and it'll tell you which one it is. For the lat long, please use decimal degrees, and I'll give you an example. We don't need commas, degree symbols, anything like that. Those are just things I have to edit out when I search using lat long. And if you use an address, um, you know, try to try to get as close. Same thing with lat long. A lot of problems if you have a huge APE. You can put the lat long in the middle of the APE or where you think the practice is most likely going to happen. That's just something we have to work with. A lot of times addresses are not available. If you have an address that is not quite at the site, please indicate that in the notes. Again, um, you can attach additional files like Google Earth or aerials or pictures. That's completely fine. Just don't substitute it for the map, the topo map itself that accompanies the CRR. If there's extra information or something you may think is relevant, by all means send it to me. All information's good in these respects. Just don't please do not put a Google Earth screenshot for your USGS topo. It makes my job infinitely harder. Site description, number 12. This is where you can put in writing anything extra. A lot of times things can't be seen through aerials, right? We have limited aerials or limited maps. So a common one is, well, not common, but sometimes it's artifacts were reported with previous owners, or um, a site owner's grandfather collected some, but they haven't seen any in a long time. If there's standing water, that's a big one. Please put that here. If it's heavily disturbed, for example, if there's been a tree harvest and the ground is totally uprooted, something like that may not show up on Google Earth if it's been recent, or on aerials if it's been recent. But here's where you can alert me to anything else. This is just reiterating as we get into the map. Is similar to the APE. So I'm not going to go over this. I'll skip to the next slide. This is just an example of a good map. I don't think it's 1 to 24,000. So we could consider this an additional one. I've blocked out all the locational information I can. But this is a clean, simple map, right? You have the thin yellow APE lines. You have the watering facilities marked out. Um, you have a scale. You have a north arrow. Nothing's obscured. I can look at it. I can see what's going on. I can see the contour lines. I can see that there's nothing hiding underneath um, underneath how you've represented your practices. Um, so this is what I would consider a clean map that's easy to use. So one question I've been asked is, what about multiple submissions, not only for EWP, um, but it's certainly something that occurs during EWP, is these linear projects that are, let's for example, a string bank that may be several kilometers long, and it would seem logical to combine the practice on a single CRR. Here's the problem: is there are only two options on the form, which is proceed and additional follow-up is needed. So if you have multiple practices that are not linked in any way, right, except by geography, then if one requires additional follow-up, that's going to delay all of them. So it's better to submit multiple CRRs in that instance. However, some of these are linked, which is fine. It's very normal to have like a heavy use area, a pipeline, and a fence all in one, or a water well all in one. And that's fine. Those are interlinked. They're in the same circumscribed small geographic area. But some of these are not. And so I'm just going to give you one example to show you that how you could help all of us with additional maps which show linear relationships. So here's the map I created. It's not, it doesn't represent anything that's actually going on in the world. It's just for the purpose of this presentation. But let's say you had like for example, this creek, and you had a string bank project, and it's several kilometers long. I would not put all these on the same CRR. For example, with these distances, we could easily see that, let's say RC1, there's been recorded archaeological sites. RC3, there's nothing there. There's a total different environment. So I would have to mark additional follow-up for all of these. So in this instance, I would submit 3 separate ones, but you could alert me with a simple Google map how these are all interrelated. All right. This helps in planning. So let's say we have to make a site visit, we can schedule all these for the same day, if possible. And it helps to sort of visualize what's going on, and it could be that maybe while we go look at RC1, we see, well, RC2, there's something there as well. So this can be very helpful in linear requests, right? These things that are attached geographically, but they're not linked to one another in a very tight area. Um, so this doesn't replace a topo in the CRR, um, but this is the type of additional information that can be very helpful. So to summarize cultural resource reviews and EWP, clean, easy to read maps. Clutter is our enemy. Don't obscure map features. We need to see what's going on when we look at these maps and see elevation change and contour lines and relief and environmental features. And if there's cultural resources like cemeteries there, don't submit multiple requests on the same CRR unless they're linked somehow. Don't include additional, please do include additional information as necessary. Use your best judgment. You're the professionals on the ground. If you think it's helpful, I'm pretty sure I'm going to think it's helpful. Again, these extra maps showing these relationships can be very useful, especially considering that we're anticipating a large amount of requests. And finally, don't stress out on the APE. In my view, the manner in which you mark it on the map using lightweight yellow lines is more important than if you get it within a couple of square meters of it being perfect, because we don't know, as we find out more about the cultural resources that are present or evident, that APE is likely to change. And so when we do these, let's think about them as a sort of introductory APE, and we need to include as much knowledge as we can. Remember, if there's going to be a staging area, if you're going to have to bring in heavy equipment, let's include all those. And it doesn't have to be a circle. It can be however you want to represent it. So that's what we have for a quick guide to filling out cultural resource reviews and EWP. Thank you.